Zimbabwe, officially the Republic of Zimbabwe, is a landlocked country located in southern Africa. It is located between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers. It has an area of 390,757 square kilometer. Its capital and largest city are Harare. Its official currency is the United States dollar.
Zimbabwe is a landlocked country in South Central Africa. It is located between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers. Elevation in the river basin range from less than 2,000 feet to over 7,000 feet in the eastern highlands. The country Zimbabwe is bordered by 5 other countries, which is Botswana, Mozambique, South Africa, Zambia, and Namibia at the west side. After declaring independence from the former British colony, Zimbabwe established the Republic of Zimbabwe in 1980. Prior to the adoption of the name Zimbabwe, the country was known as Southern Rhodesia. Following the independence, ex-president Robert Mugabe converted the Rhodesian currency into the Zimbabwean dollar. Zimbabwe economy was in very good shape, with wheat production exceedingly high in the year without drought. At the same time, the tobacco industry is flourishing and the country's economic indicators are strong. In the 1980s, its value was equal to the US dollar. However, the story changed in 2009 when the value of Zimbabwe fell dramatically. This occurred as a result of economic failure and extremely high inflation in this landlocked country. Zimbabwe inflation rate is historic because it is the worst in the world. Robert Mugabe, who led the Zimbabwe African National Union Party and was the ruling party at the time, ran the Economic Structural Adjustment Program EASP from 1991 to 1996, which had a negative impact on the country's economy. The economic crisis began in 1988 as a result of inflation and high interest rate. Because of policy differences with the government, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have suspended aid to Zimbabwe. The printing of money at exorbitant rates is one of the primary causes of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwean government has printed massive amount of money to fund its involvement in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as to meet financial needs during the Second Congo War and to fund soldiers and government official high salary demands.
So let me go through to point number 2. It's about the macroeconomic issue that happened in Zimbabwe. The issue is about the inflation and hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. As you all know, hyperinflation is a term in economics to describe a scenario which is the prices of all products and services grow at an uncontrollable rate over a set length of time. Then when the rate of inflation rises by more than 50% in a month, it is referred to as hyperinflation. Moreover, Zimbabwe inflation predicament is complicated by the fact that the country has previously suffered considerable hyperinflation because the Zimbabwe dollar is no longer in circulation since the government has officially discontinued its owning to severe hyperinflation. For example, the country inflation rate in November 2008 was 79,600 billion %, which translated to a daily inflation rate of 98%. So as a result, the price of products and services in Zimbabwe nearly doubles every day, making them more costly than the initial price in Zimbabwe. With an unemployment rate of more than 70%, economic activity in Zimbabwe has nearly cases, thereby turning the domestic sector into a barter system. To summarize, inflation is heavily dependent on economic assumption, making it difficult to control inflation once it has risen over a certain level. Alright, so what we can see here is the inflation graph rate in Zimbabwe. In this case, Zimbabwe annually consumer price inflation increased to 131.7% in May 2022, up from 96.4% the month before. And then the currency collapsed after the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe issued a new interbank rate of 276 per dollar on May 9. And then resulting in the highest inflation rate since last May, then before the interbank rate was introduced. The Zimbabwe dollar legally traded at 166 per US dollar and as high as 420 on the black market. Then the consumer prices increased by 21% on a monthly basis, the largest since July 2020, and following a 15.5% gain in April according to the report.
Fiscal policy is a policy that alters the balance between government spending and taxation to affect aggregate demands. Fiscal policy also deals with how the government manages the economy by changing the size and types of economies, taxation, public debt, government spending, and revenue. Fiscal policy is divided into two categories, which is contractionary and expansionary. During inflation, contractionary fiscal policy attempts to shrink the money supply. The policy asks the government to postpone any development investment while also raising tax. Expansionary fiscal policy, on the other hand, aims to boost the economy, and it is frequently utilized during economic downturns, high employment rates, or other abbreviated business cycle stage. This policy demands the government to increase spending, lower tax, or do both. Now, I will talk about fiscal policy in Zimbabwe. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Zimbabwe government relied heavily on the budgetary assistance from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the commercial lenders. The over-reliance on the external borrowings to fund the national budget resulted in the amassing of massive debt commitments, and the country defaulted on its payment obligation in 1999, earning the title uncredited. The government of Zimbabwe made its first fiscal policy pronouncement in 1980s, pledging to maintain fiscal soundness by lowering the rate of growth of net current expenditure to less than 7% in real terms, or 1% less than the annual growth rate of GDP. In the 1980s, this was intended to lower the budget deficit and allow for long-term fiscal policy control. Zimbabwe's government implemented liberalization initiative as part of economic structural adjustment program in the early 1990s. Fiscal policy remained tight with SDR funding the majority of the new spending. The fiscal balance deteriorated to a 1.5% GDP cash deficit. The biggest contributors to the fiscal deficit were vaccine and purchase and increased spending on agricultural and public infrastructure. The performance of corporate income tax, VAT, and money transfer tax all improved, resulting in increased revenue collection. The government acquired the RBZ legacy debt, which added over 2.5 billion to external areas, bringing total external debt 14.5 billion.
Monetary policy. Monetary policy is a government policy on money supply and credit creation aimed at achieving higher economic growth, stability in prices, and full employment. In Zimbabwe, the key policy problems are producing income growth, decreasing poverty, and halting land degradation. At independence, the government tried to redistribute wealth through growth, but it ran into macroeconomic problems. The government has begun a liberalization initiative after a period of import concentration. So far, the economic structure has been reoriented toward primary goods with negative effects for growth and distribution. In terms of the poverty and land degradation, this technique is difficult to consider as beneficial. The Federal Reserve System is in charge of monetary policy, and it has the authority to reduce or increase the money supply as well as raise or draw short-term interest rates, making borrowing more difficult or easier. When the Fed considers the inflation is a problem, it will apply contractionary policy, which involves reducing the money supply and raising interest rates. Borrowers must pay more for the money they borrow when rates are higher, and banks are more selective in granting loans. Because money is tighter and hence more expensive to borrow, demand for products and services will fall, and prices also will fall as well. After years of hyperinflation, Zimbabwe formally abandoned the Zimbabwean dollar in 2015 and replaced it with a temporary multi-currency framework, which caused further confusion. To promote transparency in the foreign currency market and facilitated to the discovery of a market-based exchange rate, the government launched a new Zimbabwe dollar as the domestic currency in 2019 and the foreign exchange in foreign currency auction system in 2020. And for monetary development, to keep money supply grow in check and avoid exchange rate and inflationary pressures, the bank maintained a conservative monetary targeting methodology. In this context, the aim for quarter-on-quarter reserve money growth in 2021 was squarely cut from 20.5% in the first two quarters to 20% in the third quarter and finally to 10% in the fourth quarter. The downward revisions were forced by the necessity to tighten monetary policy.
French Revolution in a failed attempt to control inflation, and similar measures were again adopted following World War II. Wage and price restrictions were entirely effective, but they were loosened in January 1973 and eventually eliminated when they appeared to have no effect on inflation. During World War II, the yield policy was successful in the United Kingdom, but it was less successful in the post-war period. A credible income policy, according to a number of economists, can help prevent inflation. However, by unilaterally interfering with price signal, it adds a further hurdle to achieving 12 economic efficiencies, constantly resulting in a shortage and a decline in the quality of commodities on the market, as well as the need for massive bureaucratic regulator to enforce it. Monopolistic or oligopolistic economic sector, particular national industry with a major segment of employees organized in a labor unions. These policies have the best possibility of being trustworthy and effective. Wage and pricing agreement can be mutually negotiated and monitored through this organization. Primarily and financial phenomenon, and that the only method to combat it is to directly regulate the money supply. The content that price inflation is a symptom of financial inflation driven by central bank printing money. They argue that income policy will fail without a truly organized economy because the surplus of money in the economy distort other areas that are not covered by the policy. One of the few incidents in Zimbabwe history that has resulted in the disregard of the local currency is hyperinflation. The Zimbabwe dollar was worth roughly $1.25 when the country gains independence in 1980. After that, however, the currency has depreciated due to high inflation and the economic collapse. Inflation was reasonably constant until the early 1990s, when economic upheaval were caused by treaty failures and government corruption, resulting in decreased food output and decreased foreign investment. Hyperinflation began in the early 21st century and peaked at 624% in 2004, before surging to a new peak of 1,713% in the 2006. It had fallen to a 3-digit low. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe revalued its currency on 1 August 2006 at a rate of 1,000 ZWD to each second dollar. But year-on-year inflation rose to 11,000% in June 2007. Hospitals and schools are having persistent staffing issues as a result of the broken economy, because the government has ceased paying invoices to acquire and transport treatment chemicals. Much of Harare is without water.
To sum up, this hyperinflation that happened in Zimbabwe has a very bad effect on the people of Zimbabwe. They struggle with hunger as well as lack of money. This hyperinflation destroyed the economy and the people of Zimbabwe. The expropriation of farmland to appease political allies destroyed Zimbabwe's agriculture sector, with negative consequences for other economic sectors. Tax revenues fell dramatically, and with government expenditures increasing, the government was forced to turn to money printing to fill the gap through its control of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and thus political control of money creation. The hyperinflation would have been impossible if central bank had been independent of politicians and focused on price stability. Zimbabwe effectively adopted a foreign currency as official currency. The US dollar was the most credible and widely traded within Zimbabwe. The government stopped printing Zimbabwe dollars entirely in 2009. This implicitly solved the long-standing problem of Zimbabwean dollar skepticism by compelling people to use the foreign currency of their choice. Since then, Zimbabwe has relied on a mix of foreign currencies, primarily US dollars.
Running a business in Zimbabwe is tough. The constant uncertainty over the volatile Zimbabwean dollar doesn't help. To make matters worse, banks were recently ordered to stop lending with immediate effect. The central bank's temporary freeze on loans aimed to contain inflation and stabilize the economy. Entrepreneurs such as Wanda Manyozo panicked. His business supplies mining parts.
If I can get an order from the mine, it will be too big for me to handle myself. So I go to the bank and get what we call soft loan. I do the service, I do the job, I repay back my loan so that I will keep my business going. But when we heard the news, to us it was a big disaster because we can't do without the banks.
A few days later, the decision to stop lending was reversed and things went back to normal. But some economists say the damage was already done and dealt another blow to Zimbabwe's image internationally.
You expect more of this towards as they run up to the elections. So anyone who is thinking of Zimbabwe to lend money, we have to think twice. So we will remain excluded in the global financial system as a country until after the elections of 2023 in July.
Zimbabweans struggling to cope with hyperinflation are used to sudden announcements from the central bank. They know whenever there's a change in economic policy or banking rules, they can expect more hard times. Many people here don't have faith in the Zimbabwean dollar because of its rapid devaluation. They prefer American dollars, either to hold on to a security or spend on business transactions. But inflation keeps rising, and that's led to a big increase in prices of basic goods. To help consumers cope with the high cost of living, the government is allowing people to import goods such as cooking oil and sugar tax-free. But that's expected to affect the local manufacturing industry and lead to more job losses. The COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine is hurting economies worldwide. But maybe in Zimbabwe's case, policy inconsistencies could also be to blame. Haru Matata, Al Jazeera, Harare.